Hey, everybody. Welcome to episode 4, right? 4?
No idea.
No idea. 4. Episode 4 of After Service Podcast with Open Door Community Church. I'm Joe Brookhouse, and this
I'm
is
Pastor Brian.
There we go. This has been fun, and we found out that folks are actually watching and or listening.
Mm-hmm.
I've been podcasting long enough that that's not something I take for granted. I remember my old boss saying, well, how many people are listening to your episode? This was early in one of my podcasts. I said, I think we got 72 listens. And he's like, what? It's like, why are you bothering? But you know, for the people who are listening, it registers, you know?
Yeah. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
The fact that somebody actually cares about what we are blabbing about for a little bit. So hello, all you who are listening. And I know some of you very much personally, and I appreciate it and hope you're having a good day.
Yeah, I hope the new year is going well for you.
Yeah.
For those of you who saw our service on Sunday, we've already wished you Happy New Year. For those of you who didn't see the service on Sunday, you should probably hit pause, go watch the service, and come back, and then Happy New Year.
Again.
Again, yeah. So let's hear the, well, actually, do we have any announcements, anything we want to share with folks that... Okay.
I don't know. Yeah. Life is, you know, for the church, in a lot of ways, January slows down. So
For me, there's definitely a, ooh.
Yeah.
You know, did you get an air fryer? Actually, I meant to ask you that. Did you get an air fryer?
Oh, we did get an air fryer. It was a gift. So, yeah. So it was really nice. So
all right.
I appreciate it. It's a very nice one.
We find that we cook in. This is not a podcast about air fryers, but
No.
But it's something that Brian and I have been talking about before and after service. And we both like to cook, and they're handy.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. Anyways, banter aside, how about the elevator pitch from the sermon on Sunday?
You know, I was doing a summary of just kind of getting us back into the groove, looking at Mark. And so I was just kind of looking at the overview of chapters 1 through about 3.5. And we just talked about, you know, who Jesus is. You know, so we looked at some big names that he talked about, and we were all about getting to know Jesus. So we talked about how he's called the Son of God, the Beloved, he's the Holy One. And then we went through what that meant. And then we talked about that he is the Christ, the King, the Messiah, the Son of Man, and just thinking through what these names mean. And then just kind of stepped back and like, well, let's look at just how does Jesus act in general? And all of the kind of the underlying idea of all of it was, let's get to know who he is. Let's think about who he is and treat him like you would a person in terms of how you want to get to know him. And so, you know, what would you do to get to know a person? You would learn stuff about him. You need to learn, you know, what kind of job they have, what's their job titles, what they're, you know, what do they like, what do they don't like? You know, you need to literally spend time with them on a regular basis. And so that was the basic idea. And there's so many different ways we could go with this. You know, one of it is my testimony. We talked about that. We could talk about some of the meaning of some of these names. It's kind of up to you where you want to go, but that gives you a sense.
Well, I'm definitely interested in a little bit about your testimony. You alluded to that on Sunday. I'd like to go back to our first episode where you had mentioned that you grew up in a home where faith wasn't an important thing. It was not a Christian household, I think is what you said. So I'd like to understand a little bit about what your family of origin was in terms of that. And then that I think will speak to being at camp. How you even got to camp, I'd like to understand.
Okay. I grew up in a, for better or worse, almost a Leave It to Beaver kind of house. You know, my parents were older. They had their first child in 1950. So they really were Leave It to Beaver people. I have two brothers. One's 18 years older than me. I was the youngest of them. And so it was just a very, very traditional. Mom very traditional house. Mom did eventually start to work when I was in 4th grade, but it was a very, traditional family, traditional values, good people, wonderful people. They came to Christ later on in life. Mom may have always been a believer. I don't know that Dad was until much later. But when like neighbors would invite me to go to church, they would say, sure, go to church. Why not? Hey, church is a good thing. But in terms of talking about religion, we never talked about religion in our family at all. We never talked about politics. It's the big thing. 3 things you never talk about: religion, sex, politics. Never talked about in our family.
What about money? Wait, we missed money.
Oh, money too. Yeah, well, they never talked about money either.
Yeah.
So that's how, I mean, when I was real little, I had a neighbor invite me, but specifically where I really started going to church was I had my best friend, Rob, who lived down the street. His family went to church. So he invited me to go to Sunday school and then to the youth group. And from there was church camp. And so that's what I did.
So that's how you got to church camp.
That's how I got to church camp.
So I guess my initial assumption when you said you didn't necessarily grow up in a Christian household was almost that it was not anti-religion, but maybe intentionally not religious, like it was avoiding the topic. It sounds more like it just wasn't a priority. There was no opposition to it. It just wasn't part of your family culture.
Just wasn't part of the family culture. They had no opposition to Christianity at all. It was literally never brought up at all. None, zero. So, and
I've mentioned this before. Good Irish Catholic family. You went to church on Sunday. You knew you knew your priest and invited him to dinner sometimes. When I was maybe 8, I was bored during the summer, and a friend said, you should come to our Baptist, Sunday school, or it's our Bible camp week. And I'm like, cool. You get prizes
and stuff.
Yeah. I'm like, I don't know. Everybody was much faster at finding stuff in the Bible. I had no idea. But then my dad, found out that I had raised my hand, as like wanting Jesus in my life. And he's like, I think you're done. He actually pulled me out of camp. And I think for him, Catholicism, it was the only way, at least at that point in his life. And that this other stuff, that's not part of who we are. So it's a kind of the other side of the coin, from you in terms of, it was culturally what we did, but it wasn't maybe internalized for us.
So it sounds like what you're saying is religion was definitely a topic, definitely part of your culture, as you said, but it had to be in certain ways, and certainly wasn't internalized. It wasn't. Yeah. So that's interesting. Huh.
I mean, it's not dissimilar to you, really.
Did you guys talk about religion, really?
Not in terms of the personal, relationship with Christ, right? Sign of the cross, I knew, we said grace, I took communion, I became an altar boy. It wasn't until I started exploring it on my own that it meant something. Our parents would drive us and drop us off to CCD, which was, a weekly Catholic study for kids. And it was just, it was obligatory, but it wasn't personal.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And so when you went to camp, I mean, that became personal very quickly, it sounds like.
Yeah. I think I was always interested in it. So, but how do I put this? And it's a little bit like with your story again, too. Going to the church that I did, they talked a lot about Jesus-y stuff, Bible-y stuff.
Yeah.
But did they actually preach the gospel to say things like, Jesus died for your sins, You need to turn from your sin to believe in him. You need to ask him to be a part of your life. That, nope. But that one counselor and
Yeah.
that one, who I think was an oddity, got in there and asked the counselor, the kids, the campers that. And that was the difference. So you can talk
Yeah.
about Jesus all day long, but if you don't actually do the point of going, hey, would you like to have him in your life? You're still missing something.
Yeah.
It's just like you at Bible camp.
Yeah. There was a point where I'm like, oh, this is real. I mean, there's something here that I haven't really accepted.
It's asking you to take it personal.
Yeah. And I remember kindergarten, first grade, being taken out of school so they could take me in a bus down the street so I could go to the once a week. It was a Bible study.
Yep. During school? Yep.
During
I did
school.
the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And learning about these things, but I was only 5 or 6, it was like,
right.
Well, I don't
know.
know.
It's just Bible knowledge. It's
right.
not about a relationship.
I remember Daniel and the lion. That was so cool, and Noah and all that. And I remember those, but I didn't know how they fit together. It was just, they were ideas. Yeah. If you go to the doctor's office, you'd see that book of simple Bible stories or whatever. I don't know if you had that, but I did. You go to the dentist's office. That was
Wyoming?
Wyoming and also in Oregon, Lakeview area, which is just south central, just as far south as you could go without being in California.
Okay.
But just a little rural place, not unlike Dallas. And you'd go in there, and there would just be a big stack of magazines and Dr. Seuss books and stuff, and in there would be the Bible stories, and you'd flip through Adam and Eve.
There you go.
And so you learn the stories again, but there's
no meaning.
There's no meaning.
You don't understand. Yeah.
And I think that's actually a lot about what you were talking about on Sunday, in that you have an idea of who Jesus is, or you have an idea of who your neighbor is, but you haven't really invested in them. You haven't spent time getting to know who they are, where they're coming from, or anything like that.
All that.
Yeah. That's that whole personal piece of it is huge, it seems.
Yeah. And one of the things, and it's so hard to articulate that or even explain it, I guess, is looking at the stories and trying to pull out, okay, what kind of a person are we dealing with here when we're looking at Jesus, and seeing the little things like, that just the and you kind of almost got to use a little bit of holy imagination in like, imagine the scene where Jesus is hearing that all these people are criticizing these friends of his because they are picking wheat and they're being given a bad time. So he goes and he stands up for them. What kind of a person is that? What's that like? Or he's someone who confronts powerful people and brings them to see that they're not thinking right. And just seeing them as a person. And while it's really biblical, it takes a little bit of, I don't know. Am I making sense? I'm not sure how to say.
Well, here's how I received that is not dissimilar to what you and I were just talking about in terms of Jesus being an idea, but not a person. That if you substitute somebody you already know, like our mutual friend Dennis, right? And if you were hanging out with him and, we were eating, just, in that story, we were the people like sifting through the wheat for the whatever. And somebody came and started berating us for that. And then Dennis came in, not Jesus, but Dennis came in and said, "What are you doing?" You substitute that in, and you make that connection. You go, "Oh, he cares about us enough to stand up for us in this situation." It's the best of human responses. In that it's righteous, not unkind. But if you think about, isn't that the best kind of friend that you could have? Who is like, "Hey, you're not doing anything wrong. Leave them alone." You see it in movies all the time, right?
Yeah.
Where somebody stands up and you go, oh, and you get that chill. Like, I wish I was that person that was standing up. I wish I had that strength to do that. Well, that's Jesus.
Yeah.
You know, that's him standing up for you. That's him, you know, standing, you know, literally standing where you should be and taking the brunt of that.
And trying to see that in Scripture, I think a lot of people don't try to see that, especially people who are, and I'm supposedly speaking to people who really much care about the Bible.
Yeah.
They'll look very much at, you know, what doctrine is being communicated and all that. And it's very easy to just fall into that and not miss the color of the person here, what's going on. I remember there was an old song by a guy named Don Francisco, and he's talking about actually a story we're going to eventually come up with, where Jesus goes to the daughter's house of a synagogue ruler who's died, and he the only line in the scripture is, and Jesus commanded them all to leave. It's like, okay, sure, but the way Don Francisco puts that line in the song is, he says, and with an authority I've never heard on the lips of any man, his voice rang out with the thunder of command. And it's like, that's bringing to life what's happening here when you have this incredible, you know, just din of all these people, and Jesus just steps in and says, get out. And he's not going to say it, and please all leave now.
Right.
No, he's going to, what's it going to take to clear everybody out? Yeah, it just, so seeing that is really a helpful thing. That's what I'm trying to get at.
Did your dad ever go into that voice where you knew that he was speaking with authority and you needed to stop?
Yeah.
That's the way I think about that. You know, that I knew when my dad flipped into that voice, I'm like, oh.
And for my dad, it wasn't much.
Yeah,
he didn't
same
have
here.
to say much. We would be doing something, and literally the only two words he would actually say, one word, boys. That's it. Louder with a boys. That's it. And we just went. That's it.
Yeah.
That's all it took.
Yeah.
That's all it took.
Those are illustrations, though, where if you're reading the Bible in an academic sense, that you may miss that nuance that's there. You spoke about this probably 7 years ago when I remember things sometimes, where there's the need for there to be heart and your head.
Oh yeah.
Involved in your as you're worshiping, as you're studying the Bible. That absolutely, academically, you need to understand what's going on, but you also need to take it in and allow it to change you, to go deeper than just here's how it lines up.
Yes. Yeah, and you have to have both. And in this case, you have to be very disciplined to look very carefully at the little details in the text to see what's there, to notice that Jesus is always on the move, to see those little things. And then once you have those pieces firmly there and your fingers not leaving the text, you're still right there, then going, okay, now what does that mean? What does that look like? Because if you don't have your finger still stuck in the text and you're looking at the details, then you really are just fantasizing about who Jesus might be. And that's where people get wacky.
Right. Well, there's Mark Pierce, our mutual friend, refers to sloppy agape, where you've kind of lost connection with reality and you're just feeling and not thinking.
Right. You have to be thinking. You got to be careful. You got to think really careful about the text. And so the things I said on Sunday, things like that he's commanding and that he's divisive and that he's compassionate and that he's always on the move, those all come from very specific, I can point to specific things in each one of those in the text itself, where I'm getting those. I'm not just making them up.
Right.
So.
Yeah. I love history. And one of the ways that studying history connected with me is when I started to recognize, oh, these were real people.
Real people.
And they had emotions, they had lives, they lived and they died. They encountered these situations. So Sam, as he's studying history this term, we were working on studying together. And so we read this text, and we read it at an academic level, which is, kind of basically, what are they trying to say?
Yeah.
And you remember probably studying history, it was like, oh, you got to remember the dates and the names.
Facts.
Right. Just get the facts down. I have always found that, sure, I can memorize those, or I can understand the story, what's behind it. And then it all glues together, and it's really easy. And so when we started unpacking it that way, like, oh yeah, so this happened here, and then this happened, and that happened for this reason. You start to put those together, and you have a story.
You have a story.
And
I love history too.
Yeah. Oh,
I'm a history major, technically.
Yeah, you are. It's just it's a very
no. Actually,
time
that was
period.
my degree in undergrad, was history.
No, I remember that too, which I'm like, that's why we like each other. Now, I didn't study history. I was communications and theater.
You were an actor.
And you're not.
No.
No. Different story. But there was a history teacher at Hastings College in Nebraska. And when he got going, man, his voice went up an octave. He was so excited. And he would just start talking like that. And you're like, why is he so passionate? And
because it's a great story.
And he was a Vietnam vet, and we would get him starting to talk about different war strategies, and we could get completely off topic. We'd learn nothing, but he would be talking about why the longbow was important, and all. He would just go off, and we're like, yes, this is amazing. And then we would struggle to study for the test because it had nothing to do with those things. But all this to kind of come back to around that there's got to be a personal connection.
Yes.
And you have to be, what I heard is you have to be intentional about that. It's not just going to fall in your lap. You have to make the phone call or pray. You have to set a time aside.
I want to come back before we go to that.
Yeah.
There's one thing that I've talked about, and I've never said it here on this. So I want to make it real clear before we go to that. And I'm watching for our time. Is good Bible study does two things. One, you have to bridge the world and the text itself of the Bible, and you have to bridge it with now and today in your life, and we can fault on both sides. On one hand, we could be very sloppy with the text, very, very, very sloppy, and not really pay attention to the details and not do a very good work there. But sometimes Bible people stop with that, and they don't, if I may use the word exegete, or examine, study, figure out what's happening in your own life and in your own culture. In other words, bring it to life.
Yeah.
And that's a part of what's happening here, is like, so we understand that Jesus is the Christ. Okay, I've got a clear understanding of that. Now, but what does that mean for my life? What are the implications of this? And that's where we get to the intentional developing a relationship. I have the facts, but what does that mean for me? What does it mean that when we say Jesus stands up for me? How is Jesus standing up for me today? Well, okay, there's the arrows and the accusations of Satan. And what about it? Does he maybe stand up for me, in terms of protecting me from people slandering me in this life? Kind of, maybe. But see, those are questions to ask. When he says, I am your shield, what does that mean? How is he my shield today? Does it mean maybe I don't need to defend myself if Jesus is my shield? So figuring out how it does into my own life. So I really wanted to make that point. Any comment to that, and then we'll come to yours.
No, that's fine. Go ahead. Well, okay. No, there's plenty of stuff I could say to that. But I'll say it real quick. Is that you can get lost in literal and figurative language. And part of that, bringing it to our current understanding, is understanding the nature of the language, how it was written, the intention behind that. And so when he's our shield, is it literal? Is it figurative? Is it a little bit of both? You know, we don't have to spend any time on that, but that's the exegesis. It's digging in and understanding what it's telling us.
Yes.
Yeah.
And understanding that. And then the other side of it is, and understanding your own life, your own heart, your own thinking, your own culture, and how does the two connect?
Yeah.
Because sometimes we do not understand our own culture that we're swimming in.
Yeah.
So the application becomes very either generalized or it misses the target. So,
yeah.
I think we need to be very intentional with developing our relationship with Jesus. And I really wanted people to think in terms of, if Jesus is a person, then the same rules, same way that you're going to want to develop a relationship with any person, deepen it with any other person, those same kinds of things apply. Same exact things. So obviously, if I'm not talking to someone for a long time, well, then obviously I'm not going to have a very good relationship with them. So talk to them. You got to talk to them like that. You got to connect with them. You need to spend literal specific time with someone on a deeply regular basis. Otherwise, you're not going to go deeper.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
And I know I struggle, and this is confession time, I struggle having consistent, long periods of time on a daily basis with Jesus. I just do. I've all my whole life. I don't know if it's because it's a lack of discipline, whatever it is. But I talk to him regularly throughout the day.
Yeah.
And what I want to hear is suggest people is keep doing that. That's fine. If that's what works for you, it's just like having your spouse. You don't need to have coffee with them every single day. That's fine. Talk to them every day, but then go on a date once in a while.
I was going to say, you got to have a date night.
But you got to have a date night.
Yeah.
So what does that mean for Jesus? That means maybe once a week, at least once a month. You need to set aside some time where you are utterly focused on Jesus. Just try that. Try that once a week. Spend 30 minutes alone with Jesus, and that might maybe lift some of the pressure and the stress off of this and make it easier for you.
Yeah, I think that could be its own topic. What are some different ways you can approach that? For me, I'm very easily distracted. So finding, like when I go for a run, is a great time to pray, because my body's already occupied with something, and that frees up my mind to stay focused on that, to pray, to ponder, to process, all those things. So, no, good stuff. We're about out of time. So
a little past probably.
No, I'm watching. We're at 28 minutes and 25 seconds. So, as we're wrapping up, definitely, we always want to hear from you. We want your questions. If you heard the sermon on a Sunday and you want us to clarify some things or go into more detail, if something didn't quite register or you're confused, shoot us a note. office@opendoorcommunity.cc. And Jesse, our producer, will make sure that we get the questions, and we will take some time to speak to those.
Or also, put it in the comments.
Yeah, put it in the comments on Facebook. Put it on the comments on YouTube. We're monitoring those. We're happy to respond to those. And if you need prayer, absolutely send us a note, and we'll make sure that you're prayed for, because we care about you. Any final words, sir? Any final words?
Oh, Jesus is better than you think he is. So get to know him.
Yeah. Excellent.
All right.
Have a great week.
Well, you have a great week.
Have great surgery.
Yeah. Whatever.
All right. Take care.
Thank you. Take care. Bye.